click this button up here and render it, you'll notice the inside is very segmented. Now, we can get away with doing that for this class just as we're beginning to model, because we don't really need it to look smooth. Now, the idea here is to model this thing and to make it look as smooth as possible. For animation students, you can get away with a cup that is 20,000 polygons, but you don't want to, just for the fact that the more polygons you have, the longer it's going to take to render something. So one of the things you can do is click over here on the modifiers list, and you can go to this thing called Turbo Smooth. And if I click Turbo Smooth, look what it does. It changes a lot. I mean, it adds a lot of polygons to that. And these polygons are essentially, for what we're doing, wasted. So we're not going to use that. So let me do something here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this fairly low polygon count. I'm going to right click just to see how many. Object Properties, 270 faces. It's pretty low poly, but I don't want to add any. So I want this to smooth without using the Turbo Smooth or the Mesh Smooth modifier. So by going to Polygon mode and just clicking and dragging and selecting all the polygons, I'm just gonna hit F2 to get rid of this red. It's still selected, but the red is just gone. Bless you. And I'm gonna go up here, pull this up to the thing called Polygon Smoothing Groups. And I'm just going to hit clear all, just so it clears it out. And you'll notice if I render, it cleared out all the smoothing that's there. And this is a way to smooth things without actually adding geometry to them. So I'm just going to here just hit auto smooth like I have in previous videos, and then render that again and see what it looks like. Nice and smooth. Now I didn't add any geometry to it, and things that have auto smooth added to them, or just smoothing groups, actually render faster for game engines. They also render faster right inside of 3ds Max. So I'm going to do the same for the plate. I'm going to hit Control A to select all the polygons, and I'm just going to add smoothing groups to those also. Again, just hit clear all. I'm going to hit auto smooth. See what it did. Let's render this and see. Okay, it didn't work. There we go. Render. So it's pretty smooth. Okay. Now the reason I'm keeping these fairly low poly is because there's a good chance you could have 100 of these in your scene when you're finally done. So now I'm going to take that plate back into object mode. I'm going to make a copy of that, and I'm going to make this one a platter. And out of this platter, we're going to change it by just changing the scale that goes this direction. Let's move it over so it doesn't intersect with that plate. And I'm going to add something called the Ffd Modifier to this to make some other changes. And it's the first time I actually introduced the class to the Ffd Modifier. Now, where it's found is while being in object mode, you click on the modifiers list, and there's different selections of FFDs. This stands for, oh, my fault here. Give me a second. Let's see. All right. FFD. The FFD stands for Freeform Deformation. Now this one we do, it's the minimum one. It's 2 by 2. That means it has 2 selected vertices to here, here, and here. Let's delete this. Go to the 3 by 3. Does the same thing. We can do the FFD 4 by 4 by 4, which is the most common one used, and it gives us this volume that we can then change the mesh, actually the area around the mesh. And this is something students have to understand. When we add this modifier to it, we are not changing the mesh. We are changing the area around the mesh by adding this cage to it. And since there's a pull-down menu, you can control these control points like I have selected here, and you can move it up and down. Too much, you see, tears the mesh. You can move them. You can use Scale tool to go this direction, this direction. In this case, I'm just going to select, I'm going to click F to go to front view, and I'm just going to select my top Ffd modifiers. Now when I do that, I can actually pull those up like this. And I could even select, let's say, this one, hold down Control, select that one. Remember, we are not changing the mesh. The mesh is changing because we are changing the space around it. Maybe I could do that. Now please, again, when you're making yours, do not make it look exactly like mine. I don't like people doing exactly what I'm doing. Get creative with this. So there we have a platter. I'm just going to change the shape of it a bit. And now back to the plate. I'm going to hold down Shift, make a copy of this. I'm going to name this one Bowl. And it's going to be kind of the same thing here. I'm going to use the scale tool to pull it up. Use this part of the scale tool here to pull it in, and then scale it uniformly like that. Now I'm going to put an Ffd modifier on this as well, just to change the shape a little bit. So there we go. Put a cage around there for the FFD, hit front view, Alt Q to isolate it. Now I'm going to use those control points that are just across the top. They turned yellow, and when I change that, it does things like this with it. So you can get many different types of bowls. In fact, this one I'm just going to go ahead and leave like this, and I'm going to make another bowl out of the same one. Just make a copy of this. This would be bowl number 2. But with this one, I'm going to have this one curve in, and then maybe at the bottom it's going to curve in also, just so there's some variety. So just out of one single cup, I have modeled all these different pieces. And that's where I want everybody to get to with this right here, because you're going to have a cup, plate, platter, 2 types of bowls, not looking exactly like mine. Now finally, is what I'm going to do is take this cup over here and make another copy of it. But this one we're actually going to just make not a flagon. This one's going to be a cup that actually has a handle. Now the biggest mistake students make is they try and take these parts and use the extrude to try and take a handle right out of this. And the problem is you're taking a round object and extruding something square out of it. Doesn't make any sense. So the easiest thing to do is I'm just going to work in front view mode here. I'm just going to create a cylinder. Actually, I'll go to top view by hitting T. I'm going to create a cylinder. Doesn't really matter the size. I can change that here in a second. P back for perspective. I'm going to drag my gray material onto it. Click. And I'm not going to do anything to it except for convert it to an editable poly. Select all these vertices and just pull those up a little bit more. Click on edges. I select all the edges. I'm going to add some subdivisions to them because I like to do them myself rather than have the 3D package tell me what to do. And I'm going to add maybe 10 segments. And then I'm going to go back to object mode and add what's called a bend modifier to it. When I add the bend modifier to it, it enables me to actually bend this geometry in different directions depending on how I select it. So if I go, let's say, that way, then I can make this go like that. The cool thing about the bend modifier is it's actually animatable. So if I wanted to do something that totally dances, I could actually have it do this and animate that, doing that. So if I were to hit play on that, it's not something you have to do. I just thought you might think it's cool, because we can actually make it wiggle and dance. Kind of fun. Okay, please don't anybody do that. I don't want it in your scene. So in this case, once I just have the bend modifier on it, I'm going to turn it off by clicking on this little light bulb. And I'm going to hit F to go to front view. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up to where it can actually connect to the cup. So right now, the bend modifier I turn back on by clicking on the windows, go in that direction, but I want to do it minus 90 degrees. So let's see. Minus 180, let's do. Minus 180. Now if I rotate this, my fault, you can see I've already got a handle there. I've rotated it 180 degrees this way. So now it just comes into a matter of getting it to fit on the cup. And when you do this, I've also seen a lot of issues where students will do this with it. That's not a handle. That's just something floating next to it, trying to attack it. Okay, if you're going to make a handle, try and at least convince me that you're putting an effort into it and actually put it in the center where it would be. Okay, now at this point it may be a little too small. So I'm just going to use the scale tool and scale it up a bit. And just keep moving it down and keep scaling it. So once I have the rough shape of this handle, I'm going to convert it to an editable poly, and that's going to enable me to actually make some more changes on it to where it can fit the cup better. Like I know for a fact that these handles are actually a lot thinner this direction, okay, and they tend to be a little bit shorter across the bottom to the top. So what I'm going to do is go to vertex mode, and I'm going to select all the vertices, Control A. And here I'm actually going to use the scale tool to squish this, because if I do it in vertex mode, it's actually going to work a little bit better. Because if I do it in object mode, it does something like this. Okay, but if I have the vertices selected and I do it here on the x-axis, it gives more control. So now with that like this, just kind of in this rough shape, I'm going to turn off soft selection. And soft selection is what I mentioned before in earlier videos. I won't go over that again. But I'm just going to select that bottom set there. I'm going to turn this up a little bit so it pulls on that. And I'm going to pull it out just a bit. Right about there. And with these on the bottom, I'm going to pull those up. Kind of give it a nice organic shape here. That looks okay. And pull those up. So see, it's just a matter of adjusting it now. And once I do kind of have that shape, I'm going to make it a bit thinner there. Then I can just manually fit it right onto the cup. But you want to make sure you don't pull it in too far. You don't want to do this. Okay, I will flunk this model entirely if you did that with it. So I'm going to pull it out a bit. I'm just going to scale it down to fit a little bit better. It's not going anywhere. Alright, now before I attach that, I'm going to make some changes to this. I'm actually going to use the soft selection again on the cup itself by just selecting the bottom vertices. Now you don't have to do it this way. You could select the top vertices if you like. Okay, and I'm just going to change some things here. Like do something like that maybe with it. It's more of like a Stein. Oh, changed the wrong way. Like that. And maybe I'm going to have the lip come up just a bit and then go out. Okay, now you notice the handle is starting to protrude inside of it. Okay, we can't have that. I don't want that. I don't even want to see it. So just pull it out a bit. Maybe if I rotate it a bit. There we go. A lot of just moving the stuff. So modeling also is a lot of movements. Let's scale it up a bit. So there we go. So from there, I've got my cup. I didn't name this anything. It's still cylinder 01. I have the cup selected. I right click and I go to attach and I just click on the handle. There it is. Now it's all one object that can be thrown around and drank out of. So out of this we've got our flagon, which is tend to be bigger than the cup. We've got our plate. We've got a platter. 2 types of bowls. We are not going to have any silverware because when we model the daggers and the swords, that's going to be our primary eating weapons. And I say weapons because that's what they are. So with that, you should never have to do the smoothing groups again. So if I render these, everything should look nice and smooth, and this is what you got.